I want to start off this video by just giving you a little bit of background of myself. I've shared this with some of you before, but I think that kind of where we're going for the rest of this class, it's helpful to kind of understand a little bit about where I've come from. So just a little bit about myself. So back when I was growing up, I grew up in a Christian household. My dad wasn't a Christian, but my mom was for most of my life. She still is, but she when I was, starting to delve more into math and science and things and starting to learn more, I started to ask lots of questions. And she was like, trust me, don't ask the hard questions, right? So when it comes to Christianity, you don't want to start to ask these questions. You're going to start to ask too many questions and you're going to realize that none of that makes sense and that's not a good idea. And I was like, well, that's kind of stupid, right? I'm like I have these normal questions. I want to be able to understand underlying truths. But I was like, okay, that's fine. It's what my mom says. So, moms are always right. At least I thought so, right? So I was like, okay, this is fine. Then so I still went to church and did all that stuff, and then when I got to college and then I'm like, wait a minute, I'm surrounded by these other people. I started dating this girl who wasn't a Christian, but she loved to talk about deep philosophical questions, and I was like, this is awesome. Like, I love to ask these types of questions. I like to understand all of these meaty things about the universe. And so I realized I was talking a lot about, does God even exist? What does that mean? Why is there evil in the world? How can God really be all loving if there's such terrible things that happen? All these questions. And so I continued to do this. And then one day, all of a sudden, I woke up and it was like a Sunday, and I realized I haven't been to church in, I don't know, like a year or something. I haven't prayed in I don't know how long. Really, I don't even think any of this is true anymore. I'm like how can I really believe that there is such a thing as a God, right? There's so many things that didn't make sense to me. I was like, it just doesn't make sense. I've asked too many of those questions that my mom said don't ask, that now I'm like, well, I kind of think all of this is bogus. But I was like, but if I really want to understand this, if I want to really understand Christianity, I want to be able to say, is it possible? Is it logical to believe that God really does exist? Because I'm not just going to throw it all away at this point. I should at least try to give it some legitimate chances. So I started to try to build up the understanding of a Christian faith from the ground up. I tried to say, okay, what is the basic understanding that I need to have? And so that basically the bottom assumption I need to create was, does God even exist? If God doesn't exist, then whoop-de-doo, then none of this even matters. But if God does exist, then something really matters here. I want to understand more. And then after that, is Jesus really actually who he says he is? Because if Jesus is who he says he is, then all of a sudden I have Christianity. It's basically Christianity in a nutshell. God exists, Jesus is who he said he is, he's the Son of God, and boom, that gives you a whole lot of Christianity. And so I was like, okay, I need to understand this. And so I slowly started to read a lot of sources and understand a whole lot of things from both sides of arguments and try to delve into a lot of this. And obviously here at Sterling College, I have been able to construct this Christian faith from the ground up. So when people ask me questions and they're like, I don't understand how you could possibly believe that. That doesn't make any sense. I actually have legitimate answers and legitimate reasons of everything that I believe in. And so I would encourage you that if you're at that stage, then great, that's awesome. If you're not, if you're trying to build that up yourself, keep asking good questions, keep trying to work through them. But at least for myself, some of it that we're going to discuss today has been really helpful for me to understand some of these underlying truths about whether or not God even exists. So proofs are valid arguments, right? So everything we've been doing so far in this class of proving things, these are examples of valid arguments. What that means here is that we can logically imply one statement from other statements assumed to be true. So I assume things are true, and then I'm able to get conclusions off of that. And as we have discussed, mathematics is based off of assumptions of things being true, right? We don't have absolute proof that everything in mathematics is true. We have this faith that's, I just believe that mathematics is true, that these axioms, the Zermelo-Fraenkel axioms, are not going to contradict each other, that everything here is based off of something that's true. And so that's the same type of thing that happens with Christianity, is that we have these basic assumptions and trying to understand, okay, if I think that logic is really true, then what can I do from that? And then some other things. So that's what we're going to be looking at, are these arguments. We're going to assume things are true, and then we're going to try to be able to prove or come up with some type of conclusion off of that. So apologetics is a slightly different flavor. Apologetics is the study of valid arguments for religious claims. So we've been studying things mathematically. How can we use math to then be able to go back and understand this idea of religious claims? So when we ask this question about if a statement is true, or if we're trying to assume a statement's true, it doesn't make sense. I can't be like, God exists. I assume that's true, right? So how can we instead have that be the conclusion of other statements being true? So to determine if a statement's true, we ask, is it more likely that this statement is true or its negation is true? That's basically the point that philosophers are at, that we can understand a logical structure where things are going to logically follow, but these assumptions, is it more likely that the statement is true or its negation is true? That's it. Either the negation is true, or either the statement is true or its negation is true. Right? It's either true or false. So that's the question we ask. So based off of this, I'm going to look at these 5 and other videos about the 5 strongest arguments for God's existence. Now, there's a lot of these. A lot of them have been torn apart many times over. A lot of them are actually really good arguments where real philosophers in debates with really intelligent atheists, they use these arguments and they actually make a lot of sense. So we're going to look at one that looks at moral values, asking questions about objective moral values. This one called the Teleological Argument from Fine-Tuning, the Kalam Cosmological Argument, the Cosmological Argument from Contingency, and the Ontological Argument. These 5, there's a lot of assumptions that are being, well, not a lot, but like there's some basic assumptions here. And then we're going to try to then see, can we logically imply some type of conclusion from assuming that the other statements are true? So we're back in chapter 1, but I think this is a really good way to end the semester, is to look at this, because this can have a really big impact on you as a person and for the rest of your life and for the rest of eternity. So I think it's important that we delve into these and understand how mathematics specifically relates to understanding these logical arguments.